have we become so afraid to communicate our needs and our wants?
This could be a thesis, but
I know.
depending what generation you are.
Unleash the untapped potential within you as we dive fearlessly into the realms of healing, personal growth, self-love, and uncharted territories of the human experience. Join us as we navigate relationships, conquer career and business milestones, and explore the depths of spirituality. This isn't just a podcast, it's a manifesto for the resilient, the ambitious, the soul-searching women and men of today. Grab your coffee and let's dive in with Beyond the Surface.
Right, welcome back to another episode here on Beyond the Surface, and I am joined by a beautiful soul today. Zoe, thank you so much for joining me, and I'm so excited to really dive into this conversation around communication and using our voices and speaking up for ourselves, especially as women. I'm really honored and I'm excited to have you, to dive in with you. So, first and foremost, thanks for being here with me.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Oh, well, I would love to give you the space to just share a little bit more of who you are and also what you do for the world. I know you do some incredible work, so I'd love for you to just take some space to share all of that.
Great, yeah. It's always hard to condense it, but really what I do is try to help women find their empowered voice, find their assertiveness, their just sense of power and self, so that they can be more authentic, hold better boundaries, have better relationships, where they're not putting themselves last and putting everyone else's feelings before their own comfort. I've been a therapist, a psychologist for over a decade, and I really focused down on women's health for most of it. And now I've also added empowerment and leadership coaching, again, for women, by women. That's my goal, is to help women not have to explain why to anyone,
Mm,
and just know that they've come from a place of being told to be a certain way, being afraid to be a certain way, and like you don't have to explain that to any other woman. We understand, so that's what's been driving most of this. Have a safe place for you to practice expressing yourself, learn how to express
mm.
yourself, and come up and break through those fears of expressing yourself. I
Yeah.
think that's the
Oof.
gist of it.
I love it. And I'm curious too. I Is there, what got you into doing this type of work? Is it something that you yourself at one point kind of struggled with the communication piece and being able to use your voice and speak up, or what got you into this work?
I mean, I honestly feel like I was born into this work. I'm not going to lie. I was that, girl in the 80s who was like, I want to wrestle. Why can't I wrestle? And, organized a group of like-minded girls to only sign up for wrestling until they let us in. I think we
Mm,
were 12 at that point. But it's also been a challenge to communicate in a way that people could take in and not see everything as a defense. And then as you get
mm,
older, you go through cycles where you might be more assertive or aggressive and more passive. So I've actually feel like I've been through it all, both sides of the pendulum, nice down the middle. We all also have like triggers. So recognizing that as a psychologist myself, recognizing what sets me off that I can't speak up, because we all
mm,
are better communicators in certain situations than others. So looking at, where am I afraid to speak up? What are my fears? Are they real? Are they assumed? Are they socialized? That kind of thing. So, and I really feel that communication is the basis of every relationship: work, home, family, romantic. And when you can't speak up, you can't have your authentic relationship. And so
yeah.
I think everyone gets confused. And I've especially done it with women in leadership roles who are afraid to speak up to their teams below them and their bosses above them. And it creates less efficiency, less effectiveness. People feel just kind of lost. So I work a lot on that now, and it's just led me to help people be more assertive in their lives and their thoughts about themselves, kinder to themselves. How you speak to yourself is also a communication factor.
Yeah.
So yeah, it
I think
just
what you
kind of
said
flowed
too is such a
naturally.
big piece, right? Like the piece around how communication is in every aspect of our lives, down to also the communication that we have with ourselves. But we're communicating all the time, always, whether you're at
Mm-hmm.
work, whether you're in business, whether you have families, you have siblings, like it all boils down to communication. And it's just something that even for myself, like I've realized just more and more and more how to, again, I'm not perfect. And it's interesting because I almost have a very opposite of, at one point in my life, being very young, it was almost like I was silenced and I didn't know how to use my voice. And I didn't know, especially in confrontation, I would completely shut down. And I talk a lot about how, like, this experience and this healing that I went through with, and specifically it was with my dad. But I remember something that I learned, and I think it was a book, and I'm not sure if what book it is right now at the time. It's escaping me, but one of the things that really changed and shifted my perspective on communication was this, like, not this rule, but basically this concept of just how someone perceives the way that you feel or what it is that you're upset about or bringing to the table is not your responsibility. It's not your
Mm-hmm.
responsibility how they react to what you're feeling. And I'm curious your take on that and your perspective on that, and your perspective.
My perspective is that I probably said that 10 times today. I've probably one of my executive coaching clients is we're working on like email templates in a sense,
Hmm.
so that they don't have to go through a difficult response multiple times. So going through and seeing like how have they responded, and I'm saying I'm worried. Does it sound okay? Is it going to upset someone? You can't predict that. You can't control
Yeah.
that. You can't control how someone's going to react to a boundary you set. Like you're done at 5 and you leave at 5 and they call you at 5:15. You can't control if they're going to be upset by you simply
Hmm.
saying I'm unavailable. Like
Yeah.
that's part of the communication, right? Is the boundary, is the limit, and it's always about everyone's worried so much how other people are going to feel, and
Yeah.
you can't you can't control any of it because everyone's coming with their own stuff. Everyone's coming with their own associations, their own assumptions, their own history, and everything is so weighted. Like the way you say something could be something they heard when they were a kid that made them upset or scared or defensive or angry, and you just can't
Yeah.
control it. You can do the best you can with your communication, but the real point is that you're communicating what you want to communicate. What's the message you want to get across? That's the only thing you can control. You could do things in a nicer way or things in a more neutral way,
Hmm.
or obviously you could do things in a rude and mean way. But
Yeah.
I imagine that's not many of our goals anyway. But yeah, I fully subscribe to that
Yeah.
mentality that you cannot control what other people think. It is normal to be afraid of it and think about it,
Hmm.
but trying to work through it is a big part of the process and not let it
Yeah.
stop you.
Yeah, that's the biggest
Yeah.
thing, right? Is
Yeah.
is not letting that stop us, because at the end of the day, I feel like us not speaking up, it's only hurting ourselves at
It's
the end
actually
of the
hurting
day.
everyone. I think it hurts
Fair.
everyone because then you're not expressing what you want to the important people around you. And the important people around you want you to be happy. They want you to be truth. They want you to be real. And, it's hurting the relationships with them. They probably don't feel as genuinely connected to you when you're not speaking
Hmm.
up. You're building up resentment, which is hurting your
Hmm.
relationships. So it doesn't just hurt you. I think it hurts relationships in general. It hurts work efficiency. It hurts home dynamics. Like if you're not telling your partner that you need help or that you don't want to do something that they make you do once a week. I've worked with people that are afraid to say, I don't want this for dinner, because they don't want to be a
Yeah.
burden or cause trouble. It can be really, really deep. And instead, they just kind of build resentment and they distance themselves from the relationship,
Mm.
either consciously or unconsciously. And that both hurts them and the relationship. So the
That's so
communication piece
interesting.
is actually better for everybody around you.
Yeah. It's so interesting as you were saying that, and you were saying like everyone, of course, like the people that we love in our close relationships, they want us to be happy, and likewise, right? Like
Mm,
we equally would want them to speak their truth and express themselves and be able to just feel like they can be safe to share their truth too. I think that's such a big part of it too. And then what I was also thinking about at the same time was like they don't always accept it or take it. And that's, I think, the
true.
challenging part, right? It's that
Hmm.
piece around, when you do get to communicate and they may say one thing and say, I want you to be happy, I want you to tell me this. But then there's this still underlying piece of still getting upset. And it's kind of
Yeah.
like, and that's the piece around it's not in your control. It's not something
Yeah.
that you're ever going to be able to control.
It's not in your control, and it's also just not the worst thing if someone is a little
Mm,
upset. A lot of us are moms, right? I'm a mom to a toddler, so I've only recently become a mom, but I've learned quickly that I can't stop him sometimes. I have to let him go
yeah.
through it, come out the other side, and then he's
Yeah.
fine. So some people are more or less like that, but if you saying something does upset someone, that's part of the relation. That's part of a truthful relationship with a range of human emotions. People don't like everything they hear, but in a real truthful, authentic, communicative relationship, it can be talked about, it can be worked on, everyone can have their time to process.
Yeah.
I think something that's really important that a lot of people struggle with is that also when you're implementing like a new way of being, people will react and want you
Mm-hmm.
to go back to how you were. It's a very normal pushback, push and pull dynamic. They want to go back to the
Mm-hmm.
status quo, and it's okay that that happens because everyone's just trying to adjust. And there's a lot of unconscious processes that go on in every relationship. So it's
Yeah.
totally normal that someone might be like, whoa, what's happening here?
Yeah.
And it's okay for you to say, hey, I'm trying something new.
That's true, eh? Like just to
Yeah,
simply and that's like even more of the communication piece, right? It's
exactly.
like
Yeah.
it's when we don't bring communication to the table, I feel like that's where more friction happens. That's where just things are going the wrong way because like things aren't being said and
Mm-hmm.
as the more that you were just honest and communicating exactly what it is that's going on in your world, the more peace that's created. I've witnessed this recently more and more in my own life of just especially with like family, and I don't live at home anymore with my mom, and my sisters have their life, my mom has her life, I have my life.
Yeah.
And I'm not the type of person that picks up the phone every time to call or send the message, and it's something that I've become less shameful about and just more honest about. Hey, sometimes if I don't pick up the phone, it's simply that I just don't feel like talking.
Mm-hmm.
And and it's and it's hard, right? Because sometimes there is just period of time where I'm just kind of like I just don't have capacity for anything, and I think
Absolutely.
there's nothing wrong with that. And I used to shame myself a lot for it, of just seeing the phone call coming through and just like not feeling or wanting to answer, and it's just my capacity for the day. And I've just gotten better and better. I'm not perfect, but just getting better and better of just being honest, of just like I just don't, like, I'm really exhausted today, I'm really tired today. And it's just interesting the shame that comes up in those situations too.
I think that's such a great example. And actually, I've gone through that similar process
Mm,
myself, where, yeah, my mom likes to call Sundays. And Sundays, I am beyond spent. It's Sundays is more the end of my week because of a toddler. Fridays are not it. Work is almost relaxing, and
yeah.
a lot of moms can relate to this. And so she would like to call Sunday night, and I would just like avoid the call, feel bad about it, until finally I just communicated, even realizing my new routine myself is, hard. When is my energy higher or lower? And saying, hey,
Yeah.
mom, I really want to talk, but Sunday night is probably the worst day. And this actually extended to visits finally, because I would
Mm,
get, unfortunately, really stressed. Okay, they're coming Sunday. I got to clean up. I got to do this. And it's like Sunday's just the worst day. Sunday's when we're finishing up, where we've both been, doing as many activities as we humanly can with our little guy because he's just a bundle of energy. And Sunday is when we're like, okay, we're almost there. It's almost 9 o'clock. It's almost bedtime.
Yeah.
So learning that and realizing that and communicating that, it changed things. They come over Friday or Saturday because we're all work from home people and it's okay. And
Mm-hmm.
but I had to
Yeah.
get to that point myself to actually realize what was going on, that I wasn't just frustrated for no reason. I was frustrated because I was capped out. Capacity was gone and
Yeah.
I really shouldn't be doing this. And it was accepted and it helped the relationship. And now when we do see each other and talk, it's such a better interaction
Yeah.
because
Our
everyone's on the same page.
Yeah, I feel like frustration is such a it's a thing that I feel like we don't love feeling is frustrated, but it's such a beautiful thing to look if you can see the other perspective
Yeah.
of just being able to say like where is this frustration coming from and to be able to kind of pinpoint where that's coming from and then
Mm-hmm.
creating more, ease or peace with it, right? Like just that
Right.
simple little shift, it's so simple sometimes
Mm-hmm.
but we like overcomplicate it in our mind. Oh,
Right.
I can't say this, but this works for this person, right? And we go through this whole entire thing of why it all won't work, and it just creates even more like chaos in our mind. And it's just like, well, what if you like say the thing and you just be honest about it too?
And also taking it in. So I will
Mm,
share that it took a few times of being told I'm being a little short for me to stop being defensive about it and look inward. And, my
mm,
sister took that jump and that leap and she says, you're doing this. And I'm like, I can't hear it yet. And then finally I
yeah,
could. And I was like, oh God, I don't want to be like this. That's not
yeah.
my authentic self. That's my frustrated, low capacity self that's trying to do something that I'm not speaking up about. Like
Hmm.
making my house open when really I need some downtime. Because
Yeah.
other days, I will have you, your best friend, your dog, your mother's dog, everyone over. We're an open house like that. And Fridays is perfect, Saturdays is perfect, and Sunday, So it took a
Yeah.
couple tries to even be able to hear it, which is why I also recognize that it takes other people a couple times to hear what you're saying. But that doesn't mean they can't. You're planting a seed each time. But it's okay that you might have to say it and step back and say it and step back a little bit and give people
Hmm.
time to adjust, just like you need time to hear some
Yeah.
constructive feedback, let's call it, and not call it a
Yeah.
criticism. Yeah.
Exactly. I love that you kind of planted that as well, because I think that's so true, is that we can't just give up after that one time
No.
of communicating something, especially in those relationships that we deeply care about, that we want to nurture.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it does take a few times for things to land, especially when we talk about that new way of being and you're doing something new and it's a little different. They may need to hear you a few times before it
Yeah.
really like sinks in, and you might have to stand that boundary, and be firm in that boundary over and over again. And I think it's, a lot of people say this, but it's in us holding our boundaries, it's a beautiful opportunity for, or when we speak our truth and we speak up for ourselves, we give other people permission to do the exact same. And I'm such a firm
Yeah.
believer on that. And that's why I think even just like the work that you do, I'm kind of having this moment of just thinking about how the work that you do and empowering women to speak up for themselves and in all these different ways and all these different areas of their lives, there's such a beautiful ripple effect that's happening. And we might not always see that ripple effect, but there is such a huge ripple effect. I have goosebumps just thinking about this
Mm-hmm.
because it's I always believe that the healing that we do for ourselves and that work that we do, it has that ripple effect on our generations, like our lineage before us, and also then our children, our descendants that come after us. But it
Of
has
course. Yeah.
this massive effect, and it truly is, even though we might not see it all the time. But people then, I feel like, would feel more comfortable by you speaking your truth. They're going to feel more comfortable to speak it with you too, and you become this like safe spot for them.
I mean, that's absolutely. I was thinking as you were saying that, right? People always, therapist or no therapist, friends, colleagues always came to me and they said, okay, you're the one person I can say this
Mm,
to. And it's because I'm direct and honest and no topic is, you know, disallowed. Whereas, you go to other people, oh, they don't like to talk about this, or they don't like to talk about this. They don't like to talk about this. For me, like, everything has always been open because
Yeah.
I've been curious. And that has made people share their secret shames and just like fears with me openly because I share mine. And it's like
Yeah.
anything else. Like, you want someone to share a story of vulnerability with you, share it with them, and they will absolutely everyone is dying to talk. Everyone is dying to
Right.
share and dying to feel comfortable sharing and feel like they're not the only one in the world having this thought or this struggle. So
Yeah.
sharing your own really, yeah, it totally opens it up. I think that's
Yeah.
so true.
But I feel like you probably, maybe you get asked this question a lot, maybe you don't, but under like all of it, if like maybe through your clients and the work that you do, like what are some of those reasons? Like why are we so afraid of this like communication? And like I guess we've labeled it as, it feels confronting or we are confronting someone, and like underlying underneath all of this, like why have we become so afraid to communicate our needs and our wants?
This could be a thesis, but
I know.
depending what generation you are,
Oh.
my generation in the 80s, girls were taught to be peaceful, calm. What was it called? Like, girls are made of, kittens and lace, and boys are made of sticks and whatever it is. I can't remember now. But gender divide has been huge, and what's considered masculine versus feminine traits, you can also
Mm,
think of them as communal versus agentic. And the masculine is always the more agentic and ownership, and women are these passive communal people that are supposed to care about everyone else but themselves, not the agency. So actually my dissertation was on these particular traits and certain aspects of it. And it's because, you're shown how women are supposed to be in media, and it's even worse now with all the social
yeah.
media. I grew up just with magazines and early TV shows, and the gender divide was so great. My pre-K report card written by hand had bossy underlined. My sisters had bossy underlined twice. What are we, 5? Have you met a 5-year-old that isn't bossy? That
Seriously.
doesn't want things a certain way? It's because
Yeah.
though when women express those traits, they're labeled as bitchy, aggressive,
Hmm.
problematic, not going with the flow. Where if you sit in a board of men and that are all exhibiting the same behaviors, it's like, that guy really knows what he's talking about. I work with these women in these leadership roles, and they're like, I literally said something, nobody responded. This guy said the exact same thing, and everyone's like, what a great idea, Joe. Amazing. So
Unreal.
there's so many reasons, and also I don't want to downplay the safety of it all. A lot of times we don't speak up because we don't feel safe, and that comes
Yeah.
first. Before you speak your voice, you have to feel safe, physically safe. So I really, you know, people talk about that being a reason. Absolutely. But in daily life, when you are safe and still don't speak up because you're afraid of hurting a feeling, it's because you were taught to do that. And it's because you were shown that it's not okay for you to do that. Or you had a parent that was too sensitive, honestly. A lot of us had really sensitive parents that got upset if we got upset. So we learned not to be upset or not show it and not express it. So there's
Yeah.
so many, it comes socially, it comes from family, it comes from friends. If you were ever bullied, there's so many reasons why.
Yeah.
As kids, a lot of girls are taught, oh, you got to kiss your cousin, you got to kiss your grandpa. Like, you don't have bodily autonomy. That keeps on
So true.
going. That keeps on going
Yeah.
to adulthood. Um,
Yeah. It's so true.
I
One
had a
of my
conversation with
dear
2
friends.
girlfriends. Yeah.
No, I was gonna say one of my dear friends. I've witnessed her in just like the way that she's raised her child, and just like she doesn't force her child. It made me think about that. She doesn't force them to go and hug
Yeah.
someone, go and give them a kiss or whatever. Like she doesn't force them, and I love witnessing that. It's like
Yeah.
giving the child space, like especially when there's like a younger baby, right, in the family. They just want to like smother.
Hmm.
And I'm just like, oh my gosh, like give them space, give them space. And if when they feel safe, when they feel comfortable, you'll know.
Oh,
You'll know
yeah.
that they feel good, right?
They ask for
Um,
hugs. Yeah. They
right?
both absolutely.
Exactly. They're the epitome of love. Like, they'll show you
Yes.
that they want that love and they're ready to receive that love and they feel safe for it. But when they don't force anyone to do that.
Yeah, that was actually like a kind of philosophical discussion I had with some girlfriends before we all had kids, while I was doing my dissertation and studying, fem power, all this stuff. And they're like, well, no, when I have kids, they're going to have to kiss their grandparents. And I asked why. And they said, well, I had to. And I asked, like, well, how do you feel about are you allowed to say no now? And they thought about it and they're like, not, I don't really feel comfortable. So do you want that for your children? So the same, I do not force my kid to hug or kiss anyone until he's ready, but I also
Yeah.
don't let him do it to others without asking. It goes both ways.
Mm,
He's learning to respect his space, but he needs to respect others as well. And other kids don't want to be hugged sometimes. So, and now he's a hugger, and I have to say, wait, you have to ask. Hold on.
yeah. Take a pause.
It's so because now, oh, he's finally sharing, he's finally hugging.
Yeah.
Now he has to understand that other people might feel like him and need a warm up time or just not be huggers, and that's okay
Mm,
too. But yeah, not
yeah.
feeling like you have the space from a young age to say, I actually remember running away because I didn't want to kiss someone, running around the corner and getting in trouble because I was like, I don't want to hug, I don't want to do this. And you get in
Isn't
trouble
it
for it, but
so
you
interesting?
you feel like you have to actually run away. You can't just say no and be respected. You have to remove yourself. So being
Mm-hmm.
respected like that, I think is so big for
Mm-hmm.
kids, and it's such a great parenting trend that I'm in love with.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Or we avoid it too. I feel like in a way I see that as like an avoidance too, right? You don't want to say act like and
Yeah.
speak, right? You don't want to speak so you think you can avoid it. And sometimes
Yeah.
that really doesn't help. I am
Right.
definitely a recovering person of
Yeah.
wanting to avoid saying the truth, speaking up, because of a lot of it, right? Like, you're afraid to hurt people's feeling, you're afraid to be honest, but that comes down to the biggest thing too, is you're afraid to hurt people's feelings, right? But
Right.
I'm curious too, do you feel like we are, like, now, because I feel like we are in a space and in a generation where almost like people are feeling more, like speaking up more, like we
Hmm.
have a little bit more of that. Do you feel like we're getting better, or are we not getting better?
I wish I could answer that, but I do feel like
Mm,
there's a space. And I do feel like when you do express something, now you know that 1 or 2 million people feel the exact same way. And so there's
yeah.
more support, but you're also going to get so much more backlash and unfortunate like bullying and online abuse when you say something. So while I do feel like you know that you're not alone, you also don't say things because you're just not ready for the negative, pushback. And I definitely felt that I was not an online presence. I'm still hesitant to do videos, things like that, because of certain ways of showing up feel more uncomfortable to me. But
Mm-hmm.
a big part of it was fear of those really mean ways that people can be online. No matter how hard your skin is, that stuff is tough, and that stuff
Yeah.
is really sinks in. So I think it's both better and worse because everyone has a voice,
Yeah,
and
that's true.
the people that
Yeah.
are like negative people feel more emboldened to use their voice than people trying to
Mm-hmm.
spread positivity or just strength and support a lot of the times, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So I think it's really both. There's no question.
Yeah.
But I do think if you're a woman and you speak up, you're definitely going to be supported by more people than you realize. But there's also going to be people saying like women should be in the kitchen, women, that kind of
Yeah.
thing. But if you can ignore that
It's
part,
yeah.
yes.
Is there anything that in any way, is there like, I feel like even the person that feels the safe in their body, because going back to that piece, I feel like that's
Mhm.
super, it's something that I feel like I've never, and just doing like more work of just understanding, as to be honest, I like coming from the place of a white woman, there's a little bit more of
Oh
that
yeah,
safety piece to
totally.
to speak up compared to
Yeah,
someone who, of color, we've just lived different lives. There is just a totally different piece around safety, and it's just something I've become just more mindful of, that like, not everyone is actually going to feel safe.
Yeah.
to, I really, I'm in the space of helping people tell their story, right? And this was such a big wake up moment for me to be like, oh my gosh, there is something more than just like getting over the little like mindset hump of it. There is like deep, like rooted, passed
Hmm.
down ancestral work of not feeling safe. And that's something to also just acknowledge and recognize as well. Um, and I guess like where I'm curious too, like what are ways that we can create more of that safety in our bodies and in our relationships. I know that's probably loaded too.
That is, I mean, it's so loaded because obviously relationships can be hugely unsafe. Jobs can feel unsafe, things like that, like retaliation at jobs. But in terms of safety, asking yourself the questions: is it real? Is it imagined? What are some of the actual signs and what is my gut feeling saying too? Because your gut feeling knows more than your
Mm,
conscious mind sometimes. So if you have a bodily response, that's something to look at. And if you, especially if you haven't necessarily had a history of abuse or feeling unsafe, that kind of thing, your body will react fight or flight. There's also fawn and freeze, so
mm,
playing to somebody, trying to calm them down, placate them, that's fawning. That's another biological response that people have. Freezing, that kind of thing.
mm,
So really listening to your body to see what your environment is. But the best way to feel safe is to surround yourself with people who treat you well and lovingly and don't ask too much of you, and especially don't tear you down. They want you to be better. That's the best way to create the safe space for yourself. It can be really hard to do, especially, a lot of family dynamics are unfortunately very complicated.
mhm,
That's why you see all these people going low contact or no contact, because if someone's not willing to work on themselves, that may not be a safe space to try out these tools. The safest way to do it is to distance yourself, unfortunately, a
mhm.
lot of the time. So,
Yeah,
creating the safe space for yourself is the best way to do it, but recognizing who do you feel safe with? Who don't you feel safe with? Listening to yourself. We're taught not to listen to ourselves. I don't know if that's the answer, if that is an answer at all, but it takes a lot of self advocacy, which is another part of communication. Talking
yeah.
to
There's so many
yourself.
layers,
So many
right? There's so
layers.
many
Yeah.
layers to this because I think you make such a good point around the not being taught, or even we're just being almost pulled further and further away from listening to ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think in the last like year and a half, it's just been that has been like the ultimate focus for me is just coming back to myself. Like,
Hmm.
what is it that I want to do? What is it that I want to feel? And being able to understand what my I can genuinely feel that gut response, and it's like, when am I being like getting this full body yes to do something,
Hmm.
or whatever the case may be, and when am I just not feeling like I want to do something, and removing the should. That has been
Hmm.
such a big thing too, of just at least for myself and just in my experience is um and I will say too, especially like because getting married and planning this wedding, there's a lot of shoulds that come up, and it's just been
Yeah.
interesting. And yeah, I've really been so mindful of, I'm not doing this from a place of should. I
Hmm.
don't ever want to do something from a place of should. And to be honest, I reflect that question back even when someone asks me, right? Whether it's my fiance or whatever it is, well, don't do something from a place of should. Like, eliminating that, But I think again, that's where the people pleasing comes from. It's like, well, you should do this for this person.
The
And
shoulds, the
it's
sorries. I always tell people to count how many times they said sorry when they didn't mean it. How many times they're thinking, oh, I should do this, but do I want to? Is it should, want, need? Like, differentiate those for
mm,
yourselves. Whose voice is that? Should is also, this is a big one. That should is someone else's voice. Whose voice is it saying this to you, teaching this to you?
yeah.
It can make it easier to think of it as someone else's voice than your own. Nothing silly. Stop saying your feelings are silly, your thoughts are silly or stupid. That's a big thing too. So shoulds, silly, sorries. Those are the three
Mm,
S's to take a look at And who told you this was silly? Where did you get this from? Look at it. Ask yourself those questions.
Really
That's
good.
the work I like to do. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I've the should and the sorry are definitely things that I've been mindful of, and especially just in my work environment. Just because this happened recently, there was this one new employee, and she kept saying sorry before asking me a question. I was like, why are you saying sorry? Stop saying sorry,
Mm-hmm.
please. So I feel like those two I've been mindful of, but that third one, hmm. And I
Yeah.
catch myself, I think one of the things that in terms of work and just being so mindful of, and what's the word that I'm looking for, is just kind of like doing it in a new way. Is just, I find that, when there's a lot of emotion that I feel in a situation, I often find that my reaction is shutting down.
Yeah.
And I also I'm also mindful of, I've created that story, I feel like, too. Oh, I shut down. That's my way of being. And I'm mindful of, like, am I shutting down, or also am I giving myself space to process? And I think, we have to make that decision for ourselves too, because I don't think it's a terrible thing if you take your space to
No.
collect yourself and then come to the table or whatever it is and just be able to communicate what it is that came through. But I often find myself in that space is coming to a place of like, oh, well, this is silly. Why did I get upset about it? So
Right?
I
It's
appreciate
not
you saying
silly.
that.
It's a response. And what does
Yeah.
it mean? And what does it
Yeah.
tell you? So, I mean, in the coaching, even in my therapy, a lot of when someone says this is silly, I said, we don't use that
Mm.
word here. What is this really? Is this a feeling?
Yeah.
We don't need to qualify it with anything. It's a valid feeling that you're working through. You're here to work. You're here to help. So nothing is silly. Why
Yeah.
does it feel silly? Because it feels, what about it feels silly to you? It feels like usually it's related to should. It's a feeling I shouldn't have, right? So it's
Yeah.
like, let me tell you it's silly so you can't judge it. I'm judging it for you ahead of time.
Yeah.
But I
Gosh.
also, a
Yeah.
thing I do in coaching is the communication. A big piece of it, especially at work, is helping people find phrases that give them that space so that they can
Mm.
take the time. Like, you never have to answer a question on the spot. You can always say,
Mm.
well, that's an interesting point. Let me think about that and get back to you. And I help people craft
Mm.
emails and craft statements that feel like their voice so that they can take that space and not feel put on the spot, because you can't possibly know every answer to everything. That's the whole point of work, is that there's progress and learning and development. People
Mm-hmm.
forget that, and they want, you feel like you have to know the answer, but you could say, I don't know that. Let me confer with some people. Let me talk to some people. Get back to you. I'll get back to you. And even saying something like, let me get back to you by end of day today or tomorrow, gives everyone a firm date. Makes people feel like, okay, they're not being just pushed aside, and gives you space to think.
Mm-hmm.
So I think
Yeah.
that's such a good point. Like, you might be shutting down because you don't know how to ask for space too.
Yeah.
Even though you know you
Yeah.
need it, you're worried that you need to know the answer. So it becomes this like anxious, reactive process in your whole body
Mm-hmm.
that you just
Yeah.
learned to shut down a long time ago.
Yeah. And isn't it interesting that it's like the communication before the communication too
Yeah.
is I don't know if that makes sense, but that's
Yeah.
what that just sounded like too, is like you are communicating in that moment, and the communication prior to the full blown communication is this, like, the space, or the, what, I'm not sure, and I'm gonna find out, I'm gonna get back to you on that, or just, what, hey, I just need a little space right now.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually kind of beautiful just to like create the community, but it ultimately, and I think this is what I continuously realize deeper and deeper and more, is just communication is what creates more peace, like inner peace, for us to feel
Totally.
that inner peace and not feeling that like chaos, or that discomfort, and that just that, it's going to feel so different for everyone. But I feel like sometimes for me it feels a little like chaotic, or just, it's like the pressure sometimes too. You feel this pressure, like, oh, I got to respond right now, or I have to process this right away. And it just, it creates this inner peace to like give yourself this space, um to then process, to then be able to come to the table
Yes.
with a clear mind, because we don't we don't communicate at our best when we are charged, right?
Yeah.
Whatever that means, like super upset, angry, in any of those states, those heightened states, we're not communicating
Anxious,
or
yeah.
even,
Under
yeah, we don't
pressure, yeah. It's all
exactly,
the
we don't
same heightened
communicate.
state too,
Yeah,
yeah.
right.
Yeah, it's all
Exactly.
the
It's all
same.
some way, shape, or form similar, but we just don't communicate our best there. We don't even think necessarily clearly at our best there. And so that's where I feel like then we have those moments where it's like, that's not what I meant to say. Right. And
Yeah.
that's where this
Hmm.
starts happening. And then we're trying to backtrack. Right. And sometimes it's just like, imagine you just took a little bit of space for yourself and you processed.
Even counting to 3, taking a breath, saying, okay, that pause.
Mm-hmm.
Anything that gives you room to
Mm,
think, do I know this? Do I not know this? What's the best course of action here for me, for them, for everyone?
yeah.
We feel other people's pressure and energy. People come up to us frantic. We feel like, okay, we need the answers now. But their crisis, it's not your crisis. This was also said 20,000 times today. A client said it to me. I said it to someone else. And it's like, this is such a good way to put it. The best way is to say, okay, this is their energy and my energy. Like the actual best way I can help someone who's frantic is to stay calm and think, right? Not,
Mm,
but that kind of energy, it is really contagious. It takes a lot. Therapists are trained to stop, taking on this energy. But in the beginning,
yeah.
we get anxious too. It's after 10, 20 years where you're like, oh no, I've seen this before. I know what's
Yeah.
going on. It's okay. I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
pause and not respond right away. And I'm going to think
Yeah.
about it but let them know I'm thinking about it, because that actually helps people's anxiety too. If you do
Mm-hmm.
want to help and help, make people feel better. But if you can't, that's okay to just say, I don't know. Let me ask, whatever you got to say
Yeah.
to take the space to get your, center back, your peace back. I think that's okay. I believe
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I agree. That pause, the I think too listening is such a big piece too that we forget, especially in those moments where there's, the communication aspect of
Yeah.
just, maybe some sort of like conflict or disagreement, like, not forgetting that sometimes where I learned this a while ago and it was such a like aha moment for me that just again we sometimes show up to conversations that we those hard conversations that we need to have on guard, and we're kind of in defense mode and we're not even listening
Yeah.
to what's happening or what the other person is saying. But when we kind of let our guard down and we show up and we actually listen, we're not sometimes what's happening is like we're responding just to respond. We're not actually
Hmm.
listening to what's happening, and then there's more disconnect happening. But it's truly this dance of listening and
Hmm.
responding and communicating like this. It really has to be this dance. And sometimes too it's okay to also say like to ask, I'm thinking about what you were saying of someone who's anxious, right? What do you need right now?
Yeah.
Like how can I help you? What can I do for you right now? um we don't always have to like be fix it people. We don't always have to
Right.
jump to
It's
fixing things.
so easy to jump straight into that. I've
Yeah.
obviously been told that by people. Not obviously, I've been told that by people. I don't need you to fix it. I just need to be. And we try to fix it too because anxiety is uncomfortable, and so
Mm-hmm.
we're trying to stop them from being anxious. We're trying to stop ourselves from being anxious. It's a natural response. Honestly,
Yeah.
don't get frustrated, mad at yourself for feeling it. It's totally natural. Anxiety is super uncomfortable. We hate seeing it in others. We hate seeing it in people we like. We hate having it put onto us. So it's natural to try to fix it. But if everyone just takes a
Mm-hmm.
breath, you take a breath,
Yeah.
say, okay, let's think about this. Let's pause. Obviously in my work, I help people with anxiety. It's a huge part
Mm-hmm.
of things. And a lot of it involves quick breaths. I worked with someone the other day and they're like, meditation doesn't work for me. I was like, that's fine. Don't do meditation. Take a breath. 2 box breaths. Breathe in for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. You don't know how much that can re regulate you and reset you. 2 to 4
Yeah.
breaths is all it takes. You do not have to listen to someone chime on, whatever. It's okay,
Yeah.
but they think, oh, meditation doesn't work. I'm a failure. I can't help myself. But you
Yeah.
can. And it just doesn't have to be that much, to take care of yourself for just like a minute and a half, 30 seconds even, I'll say,
Yeah.
So absolutely that anxiety, when it's coming at you, take a breath. When you're giving it out, take a breath. That's probably the
Yeah.
biggest thing you could do in the moment.
Yeah, I love that. Like the we have our breath, and I think we forget the power. in our breath
I mean,
all
think
the
about
time.
when someone's coming at you and you shut down. I bet you might be holding your breath. It's really, really
100%.
common. Yeah, you're
Absolutely.
holding your breath. I do it all every time I'm working out. My trainer's like, "Breathe, breathe."
So true. Wait, okay, I
Yeah.
forgot to breathe here.
No, remind me to breathe. I need to be reminded to
Yeah.
breathe. I welcome being reminded to breathe.
Yeah.
But yeah,
No, it
when
truly
someone's
is.
coming out, when you're shutting down, I bet you're not breathing.
I love this so much, and so many different like pieces and things that you brought, and I'm just yeah, I'm so grateful for like
Oh,
diving
thank
into this conversation around communication because it like it's just in every aspect of our lives that we're impacted by it. And so I hope in some way, shape, or form through this conversation too, and through I know through your work as well. Before we kind of fully close, first I'd love for you to just share a little bit more of like what you have going on in your world for those that resonate and land, and how they can work with you.
you. Thanks. Yeah, I mean, I'm working on a couple things behind the scenes, but I guess I can, share it in front, and that'll keep me accountable as well. Mostly, I've done a lot of one-on-one work. I've done a few workshops, but I'm really in development now of both a kind of a self-paced assertive communication and empowered communication course, and one that's more of a like a group program where you'll have all the videos, you'll have all the stuff, and we'll have weekly coaching as well. And I plan to have that available by the end of November, Black Friday, of course. And then I'm also making a few, per request, these, freebies, like a 30-day empowerment journal with prompts and
Mm.
everything for you to develop and identify your strengths. And then a 30-day empowerment challenge calendar. I run this twice a year, and it's had good feedback so far. So now I'm just making it a nice downloadable calendar. So one to one, and I do have a free Facebook group, of course, where I'm trying to gain knowledge of what people are really looking for, like where they're struggling, what resources do you want. I'm starting to do more live, so I'm really more like on Facebook and LinkedIn, and you can work with me in a bunch of different ways. And honestly, even if you just want to chat and say hi and get some feedback, I'm happy to do a quick clarity call, a quick coffee chat, anything to get you on your way. That's
Mm.
the real goal. But I'm really, really excited about this group program that I'm in development of now, because I think it's so helpful when you hear other people going through the same thing, feeling the same thing, knowing you're not alone, knowing it's not silly. Sometimes you're not going to believe just me, but if you hear it from a bunch of people at the same time, it's going to sink in deeper. So I love the power of group coaching. Honestly,
Oh,
that's like my biggest thing. But yeah,
yeah,
I
me
have like
too.
2 one-on-one spots left. Honestly, it's pretty tight. That's why I really want the group to come out, so I
Yeah.
can help
Oh,
more people. Better accessibility, that kind of thing. But yeah, you can start just by joining my free Facebook group, Women Who Rise, on
mm.
Facebook. Yeah.
Ooh, I love it. I love it so much. And before we fully close, I love asking this question. So, if you were to distill your life's journey and wisdom into a single piece of advice, not a single word, a piece of advice for those that are listening, what would that be?
It's so funny you asked that question. I thought about it, and my statement really was that you can't control how other people react to you. It's like the first thing you said. I'm like, she's gonna get a real kick out of this, I think. But also, the other part of that is that you should not want everyone to like you. It's holding you back. I actually did a live event on this a couple weeks ago that I will also pop into my Facebook group. Um, that wanting everyone to like you is holding you back. And this is why you shouldn't want everyone to like you. And again, it's
Mm,
about authenticity. Um, if you want everyone to like you and need everyone to like you, there's no way you can be an authentic person. You
mm,
just cannot make everybody happy. And it's okay if you're not everyone's cup of tea. I think that's
I
part of
love
the
that.
related to what you were saying, that you can't control people's reactions, that you shouldn't even try.
Mm, yes. Amen to that, like 50
Yes.
times over. I love that so much. And there's just so much in this
Oh,
conversation that just yeah, it's just giving me even this opportunity to also just self-reflect in these moments too, because there's always just things that we can work on
Yeah.
ourselves. And that's really just like the point, and just having these conversation as those who tune in and listen, it's just, again, this opportunity to reflect and become a better communicator, and continuing to like nurture that skill, because that's ultimately what it is. It's this skill to become this communicator, to really lean in and become better and better every single day,
Yeah.
every little moment. There's always an opportunity to say something in a different way again.
Yeah,
So
I'm always still working on it myself. There's some
mhm.
environments like this I feel great at communicating, and then I get home and all my frustrations are laid bare, and that's where you're like the safest and the least careful. So you're like, I could still say this better. I can communicate the same message in a much better way. There's
Yeah.
always work to be done, and every time I talk about it, I'm like, oh, you're right. I gave that advice to someone. I could do that too, a little bit more. So
Yeah,
yeah, I find it
exactly.
helpful to talk about too. It's
Yeah.
great. Yeah, communication brings about more communication.
Man, yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. Oh, well, thank you again
Thank
so,
you
so
so
much for this
much.
beautiful conversation. I'm so grateful for this, and for those that are tuning in and listening. I know it's going to be, it's one that's probably served them in some way to just go inward and do a little reflecting for themselves. So thank
Just
you
be
so much.
curious. Just be curious.
Yeah.
Yes. No judgment, just curiosity.
Hmm.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening. Make sure to leave a review and continue the conversation with me over on social media. And we'll see you in the next episode.